International Relations Minister Naledi Pandor says she's certain the UN will play a role in the world's recovery post-COVID-19. Pandor was celebrating the founding of the body 75 years ago. Europe and Japan faced large-scale destruction during the Second World War, but out of the ashes of that war rose the United Nations Charter. Its aim to ensure the world will never be dragged into a global war again by working for international peace, security and prosperity. So let's take a look back at what it's achieved over the past 75 years.
Born from the ashes, bloodshed and destruction of World War II, the United Nations is celebrating its 75th anniversary today. Large parts of Europe were destroyed and between 70 to 85 million people died during the war. And as a result, 50 countries came together vowing to prevent future wars of that scale.
Now my duty, my honour and my privilege in the chair to call for a vote on the approval of the Charter of the United Nations, including the statute of the International Court and also of the agreement on interim arrangements.
The United Nations, as we know them today, succeeded the League of Nations, which was largely ineffective. The League was started after World War I with the aim of preventing future wars, which it failed dismally.
We'll accept the results of this conference as the beginnings of a permanent structure of peace, upon which we can begin to build, under God, that better world in which our children and grandchildren, yours and mine, the children and grandchildren of the whole world, must live and can live.
The inaugural UN General Assembly took place in London in January 1946. Though it was started to maintain peace among the world's nations, the UN faced complications almost immediately. After the Allied victory of World War II, both the US and the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or modern-day Russia, fought for control. The Cold War broke out in 1947 and lasted until 1991. Another situation that got quickly out of hand was the formation of the State of Israel in 1947. The United Nations Partition Plan for Palestine was a proposal by the United Nations which recommended a partition of mandatory Palestine at the end of the British Mandate. On the 29th of November 1947, the UN General Assembly adopted the plan as Resolution 181. Palestine and other Arab states had control over the West Bank and Gaza Strip, with the rest of mandatory Palestine taken over by the State of Israel. Another important development in the late 1940s was the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
We stand today at the threshold of a great event, both in the life of the United Nations and in the life of mankind. This Universal Declaration of Human Rights may well become the international Magna Carta of all men everywhere.
Full-scale war again broke out in June 1950 when North Korean soldiers crossed the 38th parallel and entered South Korea. The Security Council, with the Soviet Union absent, voted to support South Korea. Just over a decade later, the UN was once again called to intervene between the US and Russia. The Cuban Missile Crisis is regarded by many historians as the most dramatic confrontation of the Cold War. US spy planes discovered in October 1962 that the Soviet Union had secretly placed nuclear missiles in Cuba. US President John F. Kennedy ordered a naval blockade of Cuba to stop Soviet freighters taking medium-range ballistic missiles and warheads there. 75 years later, and the UN is battling the COVID-19 pandemic, which is challenging its effectiveness and solidarity among the 193 member body. Several leaders have called for a reform of the United Nations, and in particular the 15-member Security Council, arguing it was unfair that the United States, Russia, China, France and Britain were the only permanent veto-wielding powers. While there has not been a World War III, leaders adopted a statement on September 21st, 2020, acknowledging moments of disappointment.